Hello, everyone, and welcome to our viewers and listeners to this episode of Let's Talk UNRWA. I am Leila Mohaber, UNRWA USA's Director of Communications, and today's host of this hour. Usually you're hearing from Mara Kronenfeld, and we're flipping the script today. I will be interviewing her alongside my colleague, Jason Terry. So in the spring, Mara is Kronenfeld, our Executive Director, and Jason, who is our Director of Strategic Programs, visited Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan. It was Jason's first time to the region, and they came back with very powerful stories, fresh insights, and an even stronger drive to serve the needs and rights of Palestine refugees. As a quick refresher of our program, Let's Talk UNRWA is a monthly speaker series live streamed on all of UNRWA USA's social media channels, with the exception of Instagram. And our goal is to provide you with an insider view of UNRWA, the agency's work. It's also a unique opportunity for you to hear from UNRWA staff generally, who work on the both in the field and here in the United States. So for this episode, we're focusing on our own team, Mara and Jason, and their field visit experience. I'm going to bring them up on the screen with me. And welcome, Mara and Jason. I'm so glad that you're both here and taking the time to tell us about your trip and what you witnessed on the ground.
Thanks, Leila. It's great to be here. And I have to say, it's great to be on the other side, not doing the interviewing for a change. So nice to see you. And so happy to have our colleague, Jason Terry, our Director of Strategic Programs, with us today.
Happy to be here, y'all, making my little debut.
I'm loving it. It's so great to have you both. All right, and welcome to all of our viewers. Please use the chat to comment your name, where you're from, where you're tuned in from, and then tag a friend so more people can hear these insights that we're about to share with you over the next hour. So we're going to just jump right in. Let's start with you, Mara. You spent a lot of time in the region, especially in Jordan, and now you've visited Jedesh Refugee Camp, which is up in the north, for the first time. Could you give us an overview of the camp and the UNRWA services provided there on the ground? And then if you could tell us how this compared to what you later saw in Lebanon.
Great. Yes. Yeah, I've probably been to Jordan maybe 30 or 40 times now over the last 25 odd years, but this was my first trip to Jedesh camp. And really, this whole trip to both Jordan and Lebanon was about seeing population suffering in ways that, frankly, I hadn't seen in other places. And really happy to be here today with Jason to shed some light on these unique populations and the unique struggles they face, even among Palestine refugees. And Jedesh camp is so unique because it's primarily made up of what are called ex-Gazans. They're Palestine refugees that were displaced out of Gaza after the '67 war, and then ended up going from Gaza to Jordan, to Jedesh camp. And of the total 2 million Palestine refugees in Jordan, Jordan hosts the most Palestine refugees, more than any other field setting, whether West Bank, East Jerusalem, Lebanon, Syria, or Gaza. Of those 2 million, this population, these ex-Gazans, are the only population of Palestine refugees in Jordan that don't have Jordanian citizenship. They don't have a Jordanian national number. And I'll talk a little bit more in a moment about what that means and the obstacles that not having a national number set up for these Palestine refugees. So the camp was, established in the '60s really as just an emergency camp. I mean, as many of the camps were set up. And it went from about 11,000 people in about '67 to nowadays, the population quadrupled to near 40,000. And when it was started, it was simply tents, really super temporary shelter. And these tents have in the last 40 years or so, they've been transformed into temporary shelters with kind of corrugated roofing. But of course, these shelters cannot be transformed into homes because there is no solution, unfortunately, no just and durable solution to the plight of Palestine refugees. And only then can these refugees, really think about some sort of permanent home. So you're talking about corrugated roofing, you're talking about the kind of materials that need to be replaced, rebuilt often. And also the prefab shelters, so to speak, unfortunately have asbestos in many cases, which, as we all know, can carry serious diseases. So that's something that despite knowing it's there just haven't been the funding and perhaps the political will to replace that prefab housing with something more permanent. Not permanent, but something more effective and something that doesn't cause disease. So, and just to say that that this camp is also, Jarash camp, compared to the other 10 or so camps in Jordan, is the most impoverished. So within this camp, about half Palestine refugees within this camp are earning an income which is technically below the poverty line, the national poverty line in Jordan, and they're really, really reliant on UNRWA for all sorts of aid. And so when you asked about the services that UNRWA provides in the camp, it goes from education to healthcare to setting up shelters. And we actually had the wonderful opportunity, Jason and I, to visit a school in Jerash, and frankly, I know you know this, Layla, better than anybody, that some of the most wonderful moments when we get to visit Palestine refugees in the field is going to schools and seeing how brilliant and bright-eyed and ambitious these children are, despite the difficult conditions around them. And we can tell you that we met with some truly amazing parliamentarians, part of the UNRWA.
They are the best, aren't they?
They are the best. I shared a video at the time, which maybe we can re-up after this airs, but of a young girl, Zaina, talking about how important her education is, how much she loves her teachers in the schools, but also talking about how the classrooms are completely overcrowded, and then also this issue of the national number. So without having a Jordanian national number, these Palestine refugees cannot access many jobs. It's very difficult to earn an income, which is why this camp, again, is one of the most impoverished, if not the impoverished, in Jordan. And then also they're not eligible for the scholarships that Jordanians or the low price of Jordanian Jordanian university system. If you can imagine a very impoverished Palestine refugee like Zaina, she has to pay international rates that I would pay if I went, or my kids would pay if they went to study in Jordan. So I think one of the key kind of takeaways for Jason and me is at UNRWA USA, we have to fund this unique population, these ex-Gazans. We have to find scholarships for these students so that they can attend university. We can't let this brightness, the ingenuity we saw, go to waste. And that is a promise on our side that we're going to be looking for specific funds that will fund these young people and help them go to university after they graduate from Thanawi.
I love that. That's so wonderful, Mara. Thank you for painting us that picture. I do remember I had a brief opportunity to visit myself back in 2019 before the pandemic, and I wasn't really familiar with that population. There are stereotypes that the Palestinian population in Jordan is thriving and that it makes up the majority of the actual people in Jordan. People always joke, are you Jordanian? Are you actually Palestinian? And it seems the indigenous Jordanian population is a lot smaller than the Palestinian population that sought refuge there. But in that camp, which is largely forgotten, like you said, I visited the health center and the doctors shared with me that they each saw 100 patients a day. I think there was only capacity to have 4 UNRWA doctors serving that camp. So imagine you're seeing your doctor for 2 minutes. By the time you say your name and you have a brief interaction, the visit's over. And that's not how they want things to be, but that's what they're forced to have to do. So I really appreciate you highlighting that. And I'd love to hear from anyone who's tuned in if they've had these experiences in Jordan as well. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to go visit these areas to see the work in action. It will both open your eyes and inspire you at the same time. And so I know we want to talk more about Lebanon, and we'll get to that. But let's talk to Jason for a moment and make sure that you unmute. But this trip marked your first time to the region, and it was your first opportunity to witness UNRWA's work on the ground since you joined our organization. So, tell the viewers what you were expecting before visiting the Palestinian refugee camps in both these places.
Sure, thanks, Layla. definitely I'd been on refugee settings before in other parts of the world and other places of extreme poverty. So in many ways, there are a lot of similarities with some long-term situations I'd seen elsewhere. But so the uniqueness of the Palestinian situation is that it has lasted just so long compared to so many other crises. And so that was sort of ever present. Um, and yet there was this sort of underlying current of hope. And there was this, as Mara mentioned, a real commitment and passion for education. I mean, these are sort of bright students um, who had at ages 11 or 12 had clear career plans and goals and
So
visions for how
wild.
they would impact the world and serve their communities. And so that was so wonderful to see. Um, and then I think in terms of like what might have surprised me was just I know we talk a lot about mental health here at UNRWA USA, but UNRWA has worked really hard to bake in psychosocial support and mental health services throughout what it does, whether it's the schools or the health clinics. That's just ever present, and that is so exciting to see um, in a space and a time that is incredibly challenging for everyday life.
Thank you, Jason. That was a really thoughtful reflection. Would you say that the mental health issue or the way that mental health is spoken about in these areas is, different perhaps than how it's even spoken about here in the United States? I'm just curious if you felt that it was more normalized in these areas.
That's hard to really say. I mean, I think there's stigma about talking about mental health really in many places, and that still exists. But I appreciated the openness of the students and the health workers in particular in addressing these issues, speaking to their feelings, speaking to the situation impacts them, and really being thoughtful about it, but also recognizing that sharing in the struggle is a means of getting through it.
Thank you. So back to you, Mara. You have been to Lebanon yourself multiple times, but much has changed then. Anyone following the situation knows the economic difficulties in Lebanon. I think it's been said that it's the second worst economy in the world right now, just very heartbreaking. I want to know, how did it feel returning this time? Can you explain how the country's deterioration um, has, since your last visit, has affected the Palestine refugee population there?
Yeah, actually, when Jason and I were flying into Jordan, flying into Beirut from Jordan, I realized just at that moment that it had really been 20. That my first time in Lebanon had really been 20 years ago, somewhere around 2002,
Oh,
2003.
wow.
And actually, I kind of, as I was thinking about that and later on in the trip, there were two major reflections. One is just, I know many listeners and many folks who've been to the Middle East and obviously to Lebanon, to Beirut, have flown in and seen this beautiful gem of a city on the Mediterranean, lit up and
Vacation. Yeah.
gorgeous. And what was shocking is that half of the lights were out. You know, you're landing into Beirut airport, and so there was limited electricity. So the city was not lit up like normal, and you can really see that many parts of the city did not have electricity at that moment, and that was just something profound, a profound difference compared to many other times I've been there. And then it soon became very clear that many families, many businesses are operating on 3 hours of electricity a day, and that those who have consistent electricity have either generators, which cost a lot of money, or have installed solar panels, which again cost a lot of money. So as you can imagine, those who don't have those resources were getting at most 3 hours of electricity a day. And I will say that while we were there within the camps, the electricity would kind of flitter in and out. So we would be in a room talking, and then we would have no lights. Everybody would stop talking. We'd wait for a generator, which was being supported by UNRWA, to come back on, and we would continue our conversation. So that really marked me. And then specifically, I remembered walking into Burj Baranje camp, which is the camp that Jason and I got to visit in Beirut. And I was there 20 years ago, and I was actually, on one level, to see the transformation was pretty profound. I have to say that when I was there 20 years ago, there was running water, and I would imagine sewage in the camp that you were walking, and you could see the water running. There were not enough. There wasn't a sewage system, and there weren't very many pipes. And so that was gone. So that was a huge improvement. At the same time, I also remember the morass of wires jumbled all together for the electricity system. That in most places was still there, where you see live wires hanging down, from maybe 10 feet up, some of them hanging down to 6 feet, 5 feet, sometimes 4 feet above ground. And what did that mean? Of course, it meant that any person living in that camp is running the risk of running into a live wire, while there are still places where water is pooling in the streets. If it rains, if a sewage system needs repair, we're talking about a potentially deadly situation. And in fact, I had just read in the New York Times just before heading there that 30 people in the camp in Burj Baranje, where we were, had tragically been killed by running into an electric wire and a live wire and being in water. And I think that, to be really honest, Layla, that was the first time I'd ever felt where my life was truly in danger. And all my travels around the world was walking through those streets and worrying about running into a live wire. So I was constantly ducking and weaving and telling Jason and all of our colleagues to do the same. So those were two, really kind of strong images that stay in my head. And the other really is, and I hope I can articulate it well enough, but it was just that I haven't seen the kind of despair, frankly, that I saw in Burj, in Lebanon generally. After visiting the camps, I've only visited some camps in the West Bank, but I visited Gaza, visited Jordan. Even understanding the 16-year blockade, 17-year blockade, and the harsh conditions of Gaza and the poverty, somehow being in Lebanon, where Palestinian refugees don't have any sort of citizenship. They are absolutely stuck in these camps. They have extremely limited access to income. The vast majority of them, if they work as day laborers. And then to add on top of all that, the absolute collapse in the Lebanese lira, and you have a population, impoverished Lebanese already suffering, but on top of that, have a population that has very few rights under Lebanese law, doesn't have access to the same healthcare, and relies on UNRWA. It is a very difficult situation, and frankly, thank God for UNRWA, because UNRWA provides cash assistance to a significant portion of this population, and without it, people would go hungry. And I think that was very clear that more and more people are on that borderline. If they don't get that cash assistance, they could go hungry. And we already saw and heard about parents who were foregoing eating so their kids can eat. We heard about kids, a family, young children, a sister wearing shoes to school, coming back and giving her sisters her shoes so that she can wear those shoes to school the next day. And those stories were, of course, extremely hard to hear. And just to put it a little bit more into perspective, so we could kind of understand here, the vast majority, the Palestinian refugees in Lebanon are living on average $2 or less a day. I mean, just try to imagine what life would be like with less than $2 a day. And it would cost, they say you wanted a kilogram of ground beef to make a meal. In those moments where people even have access to meat, a kilo of meat costs $60. Costs 60 hours of work. So you and I and Jason, Layla, would have to work a week and a half, 60 hours.
Unimaginable.
to afford a kilo of meat. And that's when meat's available. So those were all really shocking moments for me.
Thank you for sharing that, Mara. You really helped illustrate what the situation is like there. And if you just, before we move on, if you could share a little bit more about why these refugee camps have those sort of electrical wire situations. From my understanding, they don't receive those services from the Lebanese government. Do you know anything more about that?
Yeah, so those shelters, because these are refugees, there's no just and durable solution. These individuals are living; they're not allowed to live in any sort of housing that would kind of show some sort of permanent solution, and or even forget permanent, because we're not even talking about permanence, because there is, UN resolutions about the right of return, but we are talking about a situation where you can't build anything durable, and you can't even get, as far as I understand, it's illegal to even get, you're not able to get permits to actually build. So what is happening is the whole infrastructure of the camp is being built and being fixed in a very haphazard way. UNRWA has been able to make some huge progress, which Jason and I got to see, with support from many different wonderful donors, whether bilateral or individuals or institutions, which have transformed a pile of wires into a very organized, very safe system. We were really, really happy to see that. A lot more work needs to be done.
Thank you so much for emphasizing that. Okay, so the next question is for the both of you. Speaking of maybe some of the more hopeful sides of this experience, because there's always both the heartbreaking and the heartwarming. Were there any interesting or innovative initiatives in any of these camps that stood out to you? And Jason, maybe if we can go with you first.
Yeah, I think two things that stuck out to me, well, among many, were one, the camp improvement program that Mara mentioned, which really is doing their best to make conditions safer, cleaner, healthier. They have been undertaking a tremendous amount of work to bring order to the electrical system. And they showed some before and after of some spaces that were tremendously dangerous. And even so, that the wires were so dense that they were blocking light coming into people's windows. And so just by properly running and racking the wires, somebody was able to see out of their window for the first time in years, and the joy that brought them.
Wow.
But there are camp improvement councils that work with this team to sort of point out where issues are, and so it's community informed. And then we went a little bit south of Beirut to the Sibling Training Center, which is night and day different from the camps. It is spacious. It is green. There are trees everywhere. The buildings are far apart. And the students there, who are about ages 16 to probably 21, 22, are studying all sorts of things, from electronics and nursing and social media influencing. And again, the mental health aspect was baked in throughout. So they're having time for athletics, time for play, time for cooking together. So that was just beautiful to see, that there is this sort of respite space in Lebanon where young people can go get some skills for what they can do in the economy, limited though it may be, and really have some time away in a quieter environment.
That's beautiful. In fact, I think, you all have shared some of those images with me. If it's possible, I'm going to try to do a little work behind the scenes to put them on, to give folks a visual to what you're describing. You're both describing it very well, but it's always helpful to have those photos. So I'm going to try to do that. And I'm going to pass the mic to Mara for you to share perhaps some of the things that you also saw in addition to what Jason shared.
Great. Well, I guess the highlight probably of our trip to Bordeaux, we were in the camp, and then we stepped just outside the camp. And by the way, the camp is in Beirut. It's a very extremely crowded. I forgot to mention just how incredibly crowded it was. I think it started with 3,000 refugees, and is, if I remember, the population is tens of thousands more than that at this point. And and so we stepped just outside the camp, and we were able to visit a school, and it was an elementary school, and Jason and I walked into, I think it was a first grade classroom. And again, so we're talking a crowded classroom. There's more than 40 students in a very small room. And it was a girls' first grade class. And the teacher was singing in English, and the girls were repeating after her. And there were a couple of songs. I think one was around a spelling bee or something like that. And the other one was just thinking about mental health and how UNRWA kind of bakes that into education. The song was about loving yourself. And so we saw the girls singing, and I have a video of this. I think we've shown it on our social, but the girls singing, "I love my nose, my mouth, my face, my eyes," and their smiles and what this teacher was teaching them, really in some of the harshest conditions, in an urban environment that I've seen, was nothing short of inspirational. And it reminds me of this legacy of UNRWA that I heard before I started this job, some 4 years ago. And I hear over and over again from so many people, whether alumni of UNRWA who work in the States or work in Europe or work in the Middle East, or those who encounter those alumni, that the education system in UNRWA is truly remarkable. And if I could say to anybody listening, if you're thinking about what kind of investment, I mean, yes, there's need for food and immediate needs for food and cash assistance, but the kind of investment that's gonna continue to build a hope and a future for Palestine refugees is in education and job training. And the brightness of both students and teachers left us reeling in the most positive way.
And I want to throw in too that there was Spelling Bee Day as well, and the winner of the Spelling Bee got a little gold paper crown that I was a little bit jealous of. I'm not gonna lie. It was such, and she was so excited. She was showing us her crown and wearing it all day. It was just wonderful to see.
That's so adorable. I'm trying to see if I can pull up these images as I mentioned. Just give me one moment. I think I might
actually.
have
And while you're doing that, Layla, I'll give you a second. Just another experience, which is a sign of the times in probably the best way, which is we at the Sabine Training Center that Jason mentioned, this kind of beautiful setting, outside of the urban camp setting, and we also were near Rashadia camp, which is very difficult setting in its own right. The kind of education and training that this vocational school was doing ran the gamut from 3D printers to electrical systems, to fixing cars. But then it also, oh, thanks, Lily. Yes, these are some of the wires. This is the jumbled wires in Borja Baranja camp that we described. And this is us walking through one of the narrow alleyways where the wires, came down close to our heads. And this is the camp improvement program, the wonderful woman, Besan, who is running this camp improvement program, showing us the before and after. It's hard to see there, but on the left, you can see all the jumbled wires. On the right was after UNRWA and the camp improvement program came in and fixed those wires. But at the Sabine Training Center, so we went to this new wing of the center, and there's the kids. Oh yeah, there's the kids from the school. And here's the Sabine Training Center where it's located in the south. We were able to go to this, if you keep going, there's probably a couple slides of the social media. Yeah, so very good. Stay here for a minute and you'll see in the middle picture was actually students who were learning about social media and how to be an influencer. So there was actually a training course on how to be an influencer. And then this gentleman, I don't know if Jason, you remember his name, but a wonderful Lebanese gentleman who has his own 3 million strong TikTok following, and his content was all about soccer. He saw what we were doing and said, "Let me introduce you to my 3 million followers." and so we got to talk to him.
That was Bilal Haddad.
Bilal Haddad, exactly. So we got to be on Bilal's feed and get a couple of new followers for ourselves. So we can't thank Bilal enough for his generosity and for his generosity most importantly, going to the school to teach some of these students who have, very few opportunities for income generation in Lebanon, for some new and kind of modern ways that they might be able to make some income. And the girls here that their sports was really important at the Sibling Training Center. So these women were I think doing some basketball training, if I remember.
Yeah, I love these images. Oh, well, I just wanted to. Oh, sorry, Jason, I spoke over you. What did you say?
You can see the view of the sea there from
Yeah,
the training center campus.
exactly like you described in comparison to the other camp. Obviously, nobody wants to be in a refugee camp any place in the world, right? But it's amazing how UNRWA has been able to create this space to make life just a little bit better for the people that it's serving. So thank you both for really detailing that. I felt very heartwarmed. I wish I was there with you, but I feel like I was there based on your descriptions. I want to keep us moving, unless there's anything else you wanted to share on these points. Jason, as part of what you do for UNRWA USA, you play a very crucial role in making sure our fundraising is most impactful for refugees. Folks might not know that from your title, but can you talk to us about how our organization here in the US supports programs on the ground in the Middle East, particularly in Jordan and Lebanon, and how these decisions are made? I think it'd be interesting for folks to understand that a bit.
Sure. I mean, my role at UNRWA USA is very behind the scenes, which is why most of you probably haven't seen me before. But I work with the field offices at all the UNRWA field sites, as well as at headquarters in Amman, to identify what their needs are and figure out what we can do. I mean, we sort of know our capacity for fundraising and what might attract a grant maker or a major donor, or what might attract some individual donors at a smaller level. Um, and so I work with them to sort of figure out what their needs are, and they have lists like you wouldn't believe, uh, um, and go through that, and then we just go hunting in a little bit of a way to figure out where we can make connections to those needs happen. Um, it involves a lot of conversation, a lot of early morning meetings for me when I'm not a morning person, but we take
Love
what
your
we
honesty,
find.
and I relate.
And we sit together as a team at UNRWA USA, and we think, well, we can fund this. We've raised enough for that. And so this year for Ramadan, we really pivoted a bit to allow people to make choices in supporting vital assistance in Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza, all of which have experienced crises of different kinds this year. And so, something exciting about what we do. We were the first humanitarian organization to start fundraising after the Syria and Turkey earthquake in the United States. The first one.
That's right.
Um,
And that's a really important point.
and um, we've been paying very close attention to what's happening in the West Bank and doing what we can there. We've been in constant contact with Gaza, and we have so many wonderful plans. Not just for addressing humanitarian needs, but really sort of creating economic opportunity and empowerment there. And similarly with Lebanon, I mean, Mara was right. I mean, the situation is dire, and the economic opportunities are pretty slim. So we're thinking about what we can do to sort of lean into education opportunities, empowerment opportunities, workforce development kind of work, um, and the digital economy. But also the green economy. I mean, one of the things the students were studying at Sibling, which is very relevant to Lebanon's situation, is solar power systems. They are allowed to work as electrical technicians. And obviously, if the whole country is getting 3 hours of grid power a day, there's a demand for solar. And so we can create some opportunities there. So those are just a few of the things that we work on. But there's always more needs than we can address. But we do what we can as much as we can, and we're committed to that. We're committed to both meeting the humanitarian need, but also always reinforcing hope, always reinforcing care. That is critical to our work at UNRWA USA.
Thank you, Jason. Mara, if there's anything that you'd like to share, when you both shared moments of hope and positivity, and as Jason was mentioning, our organization really exists to show Palestinian refugees that Americans care across all of the fields. And despite these daily challenges that you've also detailed, if there's anything else that you want to share that encourages folks, I know it's hard when you're hearing sad thing after sad thing. People tend to feel a bit apathetic or overwhelmed. But I'd be curious to know if there's anything else there. And then maybe for both of you, how this trip influenced your priorities now at UNRWA USA. It's been several months since you've returned. A lot of cool and exciting things have happened on our front. Our Digital Futures Initiative, our Gaza 5Ks, both the one we had in May and the one that's upcoming. I'd be curious to have you speak on that for a bit.
Great. I think my reflection is, and what I most want to share with anybody listening, is that nothing nothing gives you a better sense, and this is so obvious, but it's so hard to do. But nothing gives you a better sense than visiting the life of refugees anywhere, visiting the life of people who lead, due to circumstances beyond their control, very different lives than any one of us. We can read it in the newspaper, we can even see clips on TV, but I can tell you from experience, and I know my colleagues would agree, nothing compares to being there, because we all read articles, and we all view any show on television through the lenses that are handed to us. We don't always just see the kind of a 360-degree view, and so I often come back to the U.S. with a combination of feelings of just the enormity of the issues and how difficult, but also, again, to go back to that phrase of the hope, because you see those glimmers on the ground, and you see just human nature persevering in spite of all the difficulties handed to individuals. And I think of one moment in particular was we heard in Burj Camp, we heard from a couple of young people, about 6 young people, men and women, about their life and the difficulties they faced. And we were sitting actually with the Commissioner General, Mr. Lazzarini, to hear, really, the Commissioner General of UNRWA, that is, to hear the accounts of these young people. And one of the most difficult ones was a young woman who was a Palestine refugee who'd been displaced to Syria, was in Yarmouk camp in Syria, which was the largest refugee camp, Palestine refugee camp in Syria. During this Syrian civil war, that camp was essentially destroyed, and from, I forget what the population is, but it's down to 3,000 from over 100,000.
Oh yeah, from 180,000. Yeah.
From 180,000 down to 3,000. And those inhabitants were then displaced, some of them, to Lebanon. So if you can imagine, this woman, her family was multiple times displaced, living in severe poverty. And then she was married pretty young, and then there was a divorce, and she has a young child. So she's a single mother with a young child. And men are having trouble finding employment in Lebanon. Palestinian refugees can't, as I said, can't work in some 35 professions. They're day laborers in the informal economy. What about a woman, a single woman? I mean, she was 100% relying on cash assistance from UNRWA. So it's a very difficult setting. And I just took a moment after we heard from them to talk to her, because I had spent 2 really formative years of my life in Syria, and most of that time, frankly, was in Yarmouk camp, because I had so many friends who were Palestinian refugees, who are Palestinians, and who are my friends to this day. And so I said, I know Yarmouk, and we were talking about Yarmouk and the heyday of Yarmouk, and the smile on her face. And I have a picture of this, that despite all these challenges, we could share this moment, and we could be happy reminiscing about this place, was just a beautiful moment for me. But I think that cash assistance is a key thing that I want to talk about in terms of, we talked about education in Lebanon, and particularly, I want people to just think about that need, and I want to make sure Americans are aware. The agency, UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Agency, Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, as all know, but we sometimes say the word so quickly, we have to make sure that people are new to us understand. The agency is able to provide basically 61,000 Palestine refugees in Lebanon with cash assistance. That's out of approximately 180,000 Palestine refugees in Lebanon. So that's a third. We're able to provide cash assistance to a third. Obviously, the need is more, and the need for funding to broaden that cash assistance and deepen it, frankly, because with the crash of the Lebanese lira, that cash assistance only goes so far. That need is immense. And then you add on top of that 180,000 of Palestine refugees who were originally displaced to Lebanon. You have about 30,000 Palestine refugees who were already displaced to Syria and then displaced to Lebanon. This woman I met was one of them. So the needs of this population have increased substantially, both the numbers of Palestinian refugees near or living in poverty, as well as I said, the fact that the funds only go so far, and frankly, people are having trouble paying for electricity, for shoes, for electricity, shoes, and many times food. So this is a dire situation that unfortunately only gets worse. So I would encourage folks who are interested to learn more about that. And of course, we always accept your support and are so grateful for our community, which has supported so much already this year.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you for that. I want to talk a little bit more about an initiative that is outside of both of these two fields, but has kind of further developed through these experiences that you've been having there. You talked about vocational training. You talked about prospects for hope. You talked about bringing more opportunities. And on a side note, you also talked about folks going there and witnessing this themselves. And, places like Lebanon and Jordan, you can visit quite easily. So I do encourage anyone viewing, if you haven't already considered making visits to these places, you can, and you could reach out to us about the possibility of visiting these camps in coordination with our colleagues there. But one thing that I want to plug for next Thursday is a concert called Gaza to the World, which is going to bring Gaza to you. Gaza's under blockade, and while the world can't enter Gaza, we want to bring it to you through this incredible virtually streamed concert that was filmed on the right in front of the waves of the beach in Gaza. So just wanted to make sure folks who are watching know about that, because it's a very exciting and inspiring opportunity. But speaking of Gaza, speaking of these opportunities, do you all want to share anything about what you're working on the ground there and your plans to be there later this year?
I'll just do like a teaser because there's so much still.
Yeah, tease us. We're going to go way deeper on this later on. In a whole other presentation.
For the last year or so, we've been working on what we call our Digital Futures Initiative for Gaza, which is really to create cloud-based work streams for the wonderfully brilliant and talented tech sector in Gaza. Could be freelance work, contract gigs, what have you. So we were just reflecting on this yesterday. We're making real progress now after going all sorts of different roads, but we are looking forward to, in 2024, showcasing really the capacity and power and strength of Gaza's tech sector and how the rest of the world can plug into that. So I hope to be there a little later this fall for a few weeks to help get things together and get organized. And so tune into the concert next week because it's beautiful. But also look for more to come there, because we really are, as I mentioned before, we're leaning into hope and opportunity. That is a driving force for us.
Thank you. Okay, my last question, as we ask every guest that comes on the show, Mara, you're always asking this of our colleagues in the field. How can our audiences, whether from our government to our people here in the United States, better support UNRWA USA and UNRWA's work? What do you have to say as a final thought?
Great, thanks, Layla, and thanks for giving us this opportunity, Layla, to talk to our community. So there's a couple final thoughts I would like to leave everybody with. One is that we have such an amazing community, and the generosity and the compassion of this community we see that every single day when we see the kind of support that comes in, both in terms of the checks and the online donations that we, as quickly as we can, turn around and send to the field in terms of food and cash assistance, investments in education, in solar-powered desalination plants in Gaza, in earthquake relief. So that is essential, but that's not the only way that our community gets engaged. They get engaged by registering for the Gaza 5K, which is next in San Francisco area, in the Bay Area, on September 30th. So if you're tuning in from California, my home state, we want to see you. We had almost 1,000 people out last year, and we want to beat that this year. So come register and run at the Gaza 5K and support mental health for young people, young Palestine refugees in Gaza. And then finally, it's not even registering, showing up physically. It's not just the kind of financial support, but the advocacy, the awareness building that each of you do in the community is essential. And what we've been asking this last month is for everybody to be aware of a hold in the Senate of a hold by Senator Risch's office of $75 million in food assistance. This is food assistance that's already been appropriated by Congress, and that is being held up. We're not quite understanding why. We honestly wish we understood a little bit better why this food assistance is being held up. And the World Food Program, I don't know if anybody saw a recent report on CNN, but the World Food Program has basically run out of funds for food in Gaza. And UNRWA is the other major provider of food assistance. 60% of the population is reliant, 60% of the population is are Palestine refugees, and that population is heavily reliant on food assistance. So if we don't find a way to unblock this hold, people will go hungry. An already catastrophic situation can turn into something we all really can't imagine right now. So please watch out for our advocacy alerts around the $75 million hold, and what you can help us do to try to bring awareness and hopefully convince the good Senator Risch to release this hold. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara, for bringing light to that. Anyone from Idaho or anyone who has friends in Idaho in particular, it's always best when our representatives hear from their constituents. So I hope you'll take the link that we put in the comments just now and provide it for folks to send a pre-written letter urging for that release. Jason, if you wanted to say something before I close this out.
I mean, the only way we're going to prevent UNRWA from being defunded by the US government again is to have friends in Congress. So that means every time we email you with an action alert, we really, really, really need you to do that. So please do take action, because the US government has such greater resources than we do as a grassroots community. And so please, 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 when you get that note from us, hit the button, contact Congress.
Thank you, Jason. Perfectly said. We have a community of tens of thousands across our country, and it's something that's free and easy and takes just a couple clicks to do. So please do not hesitate. And, if you've already done it, do it again. It's really important for your representatives to hear from you many times over so that they don't miss your messages. So Mara and Jason, I want to thank you both for your time and filling us in on your recent field visit, for telling our viewers about your experiences in both Jordan and Lebanon. We will detail a bit more about this in writing via the Voices of UNRWA blog, perhaps later this month, for anyone who prefers to consume information that way or would like to share. It was very refreshing to hear both of your perspectives. And on that note, I'd like to remind everyone to keep your eye on Palestine and its refugees, and continue showing your solidarity with Palestine refugees by supporting organizations like UNRWA USA. Don't forget the USA part. And to our Bay Area friends, I want to reemphasize that we're coming your way for our annual Gaza 5K walk run on Saturday, September 30th in San Mateo. There are virtual options as well, so anyone in any place around the world can participate if you go to gaza5k.org. Let's bring mental health support for refugee children in Gaza while enjoying a morning of coffee, breakfast, depke, delicious food, perhaps some live music performances. You'll see the link below to register, gaza5k.org. Tune in next week to our concert, Gaza to the World, and make sure that you're paying attention to the communications we're sending out with advocacy alerts. I know that's a lot of asks for one show, but they are fun and inspiring ways for you to be involved. Remember also to be following us on social media on whatever channel that you prefer at UNRWA USA. We are on every platform pretty much you can imagine, soon to be on TikTok. And that will help you stay up to date with our latest. Thank you again, Mara and Jason. And for all of you who have tuned in, have a great afternoon.